The desert doesn't just want your water, it wants your sanity. Out in the great, empty, sun-hammered basin of Utah, under a sky so vast and bleached white it feels like a merciless, unblinking eye, the world gets stripped down to its barest essentials. It shrinks down to just three things: the shimmering black ribbon of asphalt stretching to an impossible horizon, the dull, hypnotic drone of your engine, and the gnawing, all-consuming thirst. I'd been deadheading from Reno, my trailer empty and echoing, getting kicked around by every gust of hot wind. My AC was putting up a brave fight, but it was a losing battle. They call it white line fever, and it's a real thing. You stare at the road so long that the broken white lines start to blur into one continuous hypnotic spear pulling you forward. You start to see things. Your mind is just bored and trying to fill in the blanks. Dark shapes that look like coyotes dart across the road, only to vanish. Entire pristine lakes shimmer on the salt flats. Your mind starts to play tricks on you because the world outside your windshield has run out of ideas. I was down to the last lukewarm inch of coffee and running even lower on patience. My maps, both paper and digital, showed a solid 150-mile stretch of absolute unforgiving nothingness. But maps can be wrong, especially out here. So when I saw it, I was absolutely certain I was hallucinating. At first, it was just another shimmer, a vague structure wobbling in the heat. But it didn't disappear as I got closer. It sharpened. It took on the distinct, beautiful, impossible shape of a building. It was an old, low-slung gas station, complete with a rusted-out sign on a single pole that just said gas in faded, peeling red letters. Underneath it, another sign, eats. To me in that moment, dehydrated and half-mad from the monotony, it looked like the gates of heaven.
There were no other cars, no other trucks, just this one solitary outpost. The relief that washed over me was a physical thing. I flicked my turn signal on, a pointless habit out here, and pulled my big rig off the highway. The tires crunched onto a gravel lot as fine and pale as bone dust. The silence, when I finally killed the engine, was total, absolute, and somehow louder than the roar it replaced. Stepping out of the cab was like stepping into an open oven. The air was so hot it actually hurt to breathe. The only sounds were the pinging of my cooling engine and the low rattling hum of a window-mounted air conditioner unit groaning in the diner's window. The place is old, but it seemed sturdy. The two gas pumps looked like museum pieces, but it was real, solid. The front door had a little bell that was supposed to jingle, but it was so coated in rust and dust that it just gave a dull, tired thud as I pushed my way in. The coolness inside was an immediate, shocking blessing. It was dark after the blinding glare, and my eyes taking a moment to adjust. The only light came from the dusty windows and a single flickering fluorescent tube over the counter that cast everything in a sickly, buzzing, greenish-white light. The air smelled of old coffee, cleaning fluid, and something else, something like old paper or dried autumn leaves. There were two people inside. A woman stood behind the long Formica counter, slowly and methodically wiping it down. At a booth by the window sat a man, hunched over a thick ceramic mug, staring down into it. They seemed normal, but something was off. It was the silence. No one looked up when I came in. The woman in the booth didn't even stir. There was no radio, no TV. The silence felt curated, manufactured. I walked up to the counter, the scuff of my dusty work boots echoing unnaturally loud. "Just a coffee, ma'am. Black, if you've got it," I said, my voice sounding like a cannon shot. The woman stopped wiping. She turned her head in a slow, fluid motion and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. She turned away, picked up a clean mug, and went to the coffee machine. Her movements were strangely graceful, perfectly practiced, like an automaton. She filled the mug, and it made no sound. No gurgle, no clink. She slid it silently across the counter to me. She never said a single word. I took the heavy mug and slid onto a cracked vinyl stool. The quiet was more than just under my skin now. It felt like it was inside me. It's the desert, I told myself. Makes people strange. I raised the mug to my lips. I took a big gurgle. It was hot. And that was absolutely it. There was no other sensation. It had no taste. None at all. It wasn't weak or old coffee. It was just hot water in a mug that smelled faintly of old coffee grounds. The complete and utter absence of flavor was so deeply, profoundly unsettling. My little island of hope was starting to crumble. I took a moment to look around. Dust motes danced in the milky light. A single fat black fly was buzzing lazily near the ceiling. Everything was normal if you squinted and ignored the details. But every detail was just a little bit off, a little bit faded, a little bit empty. The woman was back to wiping the counter. I found myself watching her, searching her for some sign of life. The harsh light from the flickering fluorescent above caught the side of her head. And that's when my mind snagged on an impossibility. It wasn't something that was there, but something that wasn't. It's a trick of the light, I thought instantly. I squeezed my eyes shut, rubbing them until I saw flashes of color. I had to be seeing things. It was the road fatigue, the dehydration. I opened my eyes and looked again. My heart gave a single, hard, painful thump in my chest. This time I stared, and the fragile illusion my brain had been so desperately trying to build fell apart completely. Where her face should have been, there was just a smooth, unbroken, contoured expanse of skin. It stretched from her hairline down to her chin, from ear to ear. There were no eyes. There was no nose. There was no mouth, no lines, no wrinkles, no imperfections. Just a blank, flesh-toned oval, like a mannequin's head before the features had been painted on. But it was living, breathing flesh. A wave of pure, unreasoning terror washed over me, so cold and so absolute that it momentarily extinguished the desert heat. I didn't scream. I couldn't move. This had to be a dream, a heat-stroke nightmare. Then, as if it could feel my horrified gaze upon it, the thing in the booth behind me stirred. I heard the scrape of the chair, a sound that cut through the silence like a scream. I knew I had to turn. Slowly, fighting every instinct for self-preservation, I swiveled on my stool. The man had lifted his head from his mug. He was looking right at me. And he had no face either. Just the same blank, terrifying, utterly smooth canvas of living skin. The world tilted and went gray at the edges. The buzzing of the fly, the rattle of the AC unit, all faded away into a dull, rushing roar in my ears. I was trapped in a silent movie, a waking nightmare. I was frozen solid, pinned to that vinyl stool by a fear so absolute it had turned my bones to lead. Then the woman moved. Her blank head tilted to the side, a gesture that, on a human face, would have been curious. Without features, it was just alien and horrifying. She lifted a smooth hand and slid a greasy, plastic-sheathed menu across the counter towards me. Then, her perfectly normal index finger tapped on a faded picture of a slice of apple pie. An offer. A question. The simple, silent gesture was 1,000 times more terrifying than any scream. It was the normalcy that was so insane. Behind me, the man in the booth began his own performance. He slowly lifted his heavy ceramic mug with both hands. He brought the rim up to the smooth plane of skin where his mouth should have been, and he tilted his head back, performing a perfect, soundless pantomime of taking a long, satisfying drink. They were acting. They were performing a play, a ritual about being human,
and I was their unwilling audience of one. They had the script, the costumes, everything except the one thing that mattered. That's what finally broke the spell. The sheer deliberate fraud of it all. This was a trap. My paralysis broke with a jolt. I stumbled backwards off the stool, my chair crashing to the floor. I fumbled frantically for my wallet. What was I doing? Was I going to pay for the hot water? I pulled out a crumpled 20 and slapped it down hard on the counter. "Keep the change," I whispered, the words hoarse and utterly insane. I didn't wait for a reaction. I started backing away, my eyes locked on the two blank faces. I reached the door, and then I threw myself backwards out into the blinding, hellish heat of the desert afternoon.
I scrambled. I fell hard to my knees in the hot, sharp gravel, the pain a welcome, real sensation. I pushed myself up and clawed my way into the cab of my truck, slamming the door shut. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped the keys twice before jamming them into the ignition. The engine turned over with a beautiful, reassuring, deafening roar. I threw the rig into gear and stomped on the accelerator. I peeled out of that place like the devil himself was on my tail. For a mile, maybe two, I refused to look back. I was terrified of what I might see, or worse, what I might not. But the need to know, the desperate human need to confirm what I had just seen, was more powerful than the fear. With a trembling hand, I adjusted my passenger side mirror, angling it back towards the place I had just fled. At first I saw it. The gas station was still there, a small, solid structure wavering in the distorting heat haze. But I hold my gaze, and it began to change. The clean, hard edges of the building started to blur, to lose their definition. The rusted gas sign seemed to melt like hot wax. The entire structure was wavering like a bad TV signal. And then, as I watched in utter, disbelieving horror, it began to dissolve. It didn't collapse or explode, it just unraveled. The walls turned to granules of sand, the roof to motes of dust. The entire building crumbled silently and gracefully into nothingness. The particles caught in the hot desert wind and scattered across the barren landscape. Within 10 seconds, it was gone. Completely gone. Where the gas station had stood, it was now only the same empty desert that had been there for 1,000 years. It had been a mirage, after all. Not a mirage of water, but a mirage of sanctuary. A ghost. A trap laid by the thirsty, hungry desert itself. I never told anyone about it. What would I have said? But I know what I saw, and I know I left a $20 bill on the counter of a place that doesn't exist. Sometimes late at night, I think about that place. I think about the thirsty thing in the desert that built itself alive, the perfect little stage where it performs a play of being human. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed. If I'd eaten the pie, maybe nothing. Or maybe it takes more than just your water. Maybe it takes your face too, leaving you to stare into a cup of tasteless coffee for eternity. A new actor in its silent, terrifying play, just waiting for the next tired and thirsty traveler to pull off the road.